Hello everyone. Tonight we're going to read, it's almost night, we're going to read Evelyn Underhill, Mysticism, Studying the Nature and Development of Spiritual Consciousness. We're like 30 hours in by the time I'm reading this, and we still have that much to go. I think, wow, I never knew it was going to be this many videos. I don't think it'll be 30 more. That's going to be 60 videos. Anyway, I don't think ahead like that. I was just going to read this myself, and I wanted to share it with other people so that it's not just me reading it, because I couldn't find it online before. Now I found a LibriVox one. So if you just want to hear reading, listen to me how I turn people away from my videos. But I'm a psychologist for the past 20 plus years, and I studied it for 9 years to get my doctorate before that. And I've studied theology a lot and mysticism. And so when she goes into some of this stuff, I've had experiences. I don't want to say so much about my own anymore. I just want to read. But if I'm inspired to say something that will help us understand what she's saying, because she wrote this in 1910, but it might as well be written in 25 years from now. It's really good. Now I'm at the ocean, but I don't like showing other people. So, and the sun's not really shining. I'll show you what you can see though, because there's just a person that walked by. The sun's shining through those clouds over there. Ooh, maybe I can set it. A lot of people have their sunglasses on, so it's not like they're recognizable. I sort of parked by this tree, so that doesn't really help with the view, but let me check what you can see, and then I'll get into it. Evelyn Underhill, I write about her in the description. She inspired C.S. Lewis. Okay, so you're seeing the tree, I think. I just do this with a mirror. We're MacGyvering this right now. Okay, that's a pretty good view. Okay. Okay, so I have a mic on, so I can just put my camera there. C.S. Lewis and her corresponded, and she told him his idea of God was not wild enough, and he came up with Aslan after that, And anyway, I love her. She's really grounded, and yet she meditated for like 40 years after she wrote this, or 30 years. I don't know what it was, but hopefully. Okay. So, we're on a chapter called The Purification on the Self, of the Self. Weird. They misprinted it on one page. Wow. It's Purification of the Self, but on page 277 it says on the self on the top. That's wild. All right. I have a over 100-year-old version right here. Okay. So welcome. I forgot to say that, just if you're joining right now, just take it as it came to you today. You know what I mean? And go with it. If you'd like to start at the beginning, you totally can. But we're on the Mystic Way. This is the second half of the book on the Mystic Way. And this is one of the opening chapters, the purification of the self. And so I just trust that it came to you today on this one for a reason, Okay. Once this event has taken place, the new level of reality has been attained. It is known no more. Thus St. Catherine of Siena, that inspired psychologist, she calls her a psychologist. Ology means the study of in Greek, right? And psyche is your soul. So she is a studier of the soul. That's what I became. And I always looked at it like this. Like we ought to be studiers of the soul, not just fixing people's everyday problems, So, because if we forget that we're souls here, then why are we even here, So thus St. Catherine of Siena, that inspired psychologist, was told in ecstasy, quote, With the souls who have arrived at perfection, I play no more the game of love, which consists in leaving and returning again to the soul. Though thou must understand that it is not properly speaking I, the immovable God, who thus elude them, but rather the sentiment that my charity gives them of me. In other terms, it is the imperfectly developed spiritual perception which becomes tired and fails, throwing the self back into the darkness and aridity whence it has emerged. And so we go back and forth, into and it looks like God is playing this game of love, like hide and seek, where he comes and then goes again. And we know presence again, and we know that expansive feeling, and then go back to forgetfulness and caught up in this world and Maya and whatever else. That's why the church is good that it defined the three enemies as the world, the flesh, and the devil, because it helps you identify, oh, I went to sleep again. This time I was in the world. I was in the collective consciousness of the world and busy trying to get money and what they said I need to be doing with my time. And then it's your flesh that's like, oh, I just wanted chocolate. I wanted to numb myself, or I didn't want to deal with my problems or whatever. Or it's the devil, which are the energies that, the spiritual forces and wicked places that are working in people and situations and all that stuff, right? So, okay, I'll go back to the book. So with Madame Guyon, periods of dryness, the orthodox name for such spiritual fatigue, recurred at intervals during the whole of the illuminated life. So we are told of Ruhlmann Merswin that after the period of harsh physical mortification which succeeded his conversion, came a year of delirious joy, alternating with the most bitter physical and moral sufferings. Don't we know? My friend Elliot Smith was a musician. He's passed away now, but he wrote a song, and in the lyrics go, "It took a long time to stand. It took an hour to fall." Anyway, I don't recommend it for anybody. It is, he says, quote, "the game of love which the Lord plays with his poor sinful creature." Memories of all... I'm going to turn this. These people are just looking right at it. I just like giving people my privacy. I wouldn't want someone filming me while I'm walking. I just went walking for an hour here. So I wait till it's pretty dark, or if the sun's setting really beautifully or whatever. We'll see. We're here for the book, right? I like being in nature, though. Gives us that ambient feeling. Maybe we can hear the ocean. Well, I can. I don't know if you can with my mic. I wish you could smell this air. So he played the game of love. It is, he says, the game of love which the Lord plays with his poor sinful creature. Memories of all his old sins still drove him to exaggerated penances. Morbid temptations made me so ill that I feared I should lose my reason. End quote. These psychic storms reacted upon the physical organism. He had a paralytic seizure, lost the use of his lower limbs, and believed himself to be at the point of death. When he was at his worst, however, and all hope seemed at an end, an inward voice told him to rise from his bed. He obeyed and found himself cured. Ecstasies were frequent during the whole of this period. In these moments of exaltation, he felt his mind to be irradiated by a new light, so that he knew intuitively the direction which his life was bound to take, and recognized the inevitable and salutary nature of his trials. Quote, "God showed himself by turns harsh and gentle to each access of misery succeeded the rapture of supernatural grace. Wow. I'm not going to say how much I know this. In this intermittent style, torn by these constant fluctuations, did Merswin, in whom the psychic instability of the artistic and mystic types is present in excess, pass through the purgative and illuminated states. They appear to have coexisted in his consciousness, first one and then the other, emerging and taking control. Hence, he did not attain the peaceful condition, which is characteristic of full illumination and normally closes the, quote, first mystic life. He passed direct from these violent alternations of mystical pleasure and mystical pain to the state which he calls, quote, the school of suffering love, end quote. This, as we shall see when we come to its consideration, is strictly analogous to that which other mystics have called the dark night of the soul, and opens the, quote, second mystic life, or unitive way. It was just 11:11, right when I was saying unitive way, right? 11 is like aligned. I look at it like we're one with God. And so it's like 4, and 4 is foundational, and like aligned with God. I don't do numerology. It's just what's come to me intuitively. And I did a YouTube live on 2 Peter, but they wrote it like 2 ones, 1 through 11. And it was on this unification with God. So I was seeing it in that as well. Anyway, you can watch that. It was pretty profound that night. I don't know why I was called to go live. All right, I'm going to show the beach again. Wow, there's giant birds. I don't know what they're called. But they're over to the left. I don't know if you can see them up in the sky. They're not seagulls. They're big birds. It's not these birds, I don't think. They're not the same. All right. I'll just make sure it's not like on the ceiling. Okay, I think you're seeing where the sun is shining down through the clouds. Such prolonged coexistence of pain and pleasure states in the developing soul, such delay in the attainment of equilibrium, is not infrequent and must be taken into account in all attempts towards analysis of the mystic type. Though it is convenient for the purposes of study to practice a certain dissection and treat as separate matters which are, in the living subject, hopelessly intertwined, we should constantly remind ourselves that such a proceeding is artificial. The struggle of the self to disentangle itself from illusion and attain the absolute is a life struggle. Hence it will and must exhibit in every case something of the freedom and originality of life. Will, as a process, obey artistic rather than scientific laws. It will sway now to the light and now to the shade of experience. Its oscillations will sometimes be great, sometimes small. Mood and environment, inspiration and information will all play their part. There are, in this struggle, 3 factors. Here, I'll do this. I'm just going to put my bookmark here for a second. It's a rose, but it's really close, so I don't know if you see it. There. The unchanging light of eternal reality is the first one. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. 1 is the unchanging light of eternal reality, that pure being, which ever shines and not shall ever dim. Someone just wrote a comment on my mysticism. I think it was 28 that I put tonight out. And someone just wrote that, may all the sun shine on you and you don't have to worry about candles or something. But anyway, the first one here, this was like 1 minute before I started this. The unchanging light to, okay, let's see. of eternal reality, that pure being which ever shines and not shall ever dim. 2. The web of illusion, here thick, there thin, which hems in, confuses, and allures the sentient self. 3. And about 2, the Irish often say in Gaelic and stuff that there are thin places on the earth, where it's just like you feel God more. I would say my experience of the island of Patmos, I've been there 3 times, I think, feels like that for sure. It feels like you're in between heaven and earth, right? But anyway, 3, that self, always changing, moving, struggling, always in fact becoming, alive in every fiber, related at once to the unreal. Well, hopefully his sunglasses covered that guy. Okay, in the ever-shifting relations between these 3 factors, the consequent energy engendered, the work done, we may find a cause of the innumerable forms of stress and travail, which are called in their objective form the purgative way. One only of these 3 is constant. All right, I'm going to just turn this again. I don't need to announce it. I'm just going to keep reading and turn this when I see the importance too. So it's called the purgative way. One only of the 3 is constant, the absolute to which the soul aspires. Capital A, absolute, right? God, divine love. Though all else may fluctuate, that goal is changeless, that beauty so old and so new, quote, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. That's a verse. I think it's in James, but she doesn't write where it is, which is the one of Plotinus, the all of Eckhart, Meister Eckhart, right? And St. John of the Cross. The one with a capital O of Plotinus. I call God divine love, right? The all of Meister Eckhart and St. John of the Cross, the eternal wisdom of Suso, the unplumbed abyss of Roysybrook, the pure love of St. Catherine of Genoa, awaits yesterday, today, and forever the opening of its creature's eyes. It awaits for our eyes to open. In the moment of conversion, those eyes were opened for an instant, obtained, as it were, a dazzling and unforgettable glimpse of the uncreated light. They must learn to stay open, to look steadfastly into the eyes of love, so that in the beautiful imagery of the mystics, the faithful servant may become the secret friend. Then it is, says Boheme, that the divine glimpse and beam of joy ariseth in the soul, being a new eye in which the dark, fiery soul conceiveth the ends and essence of the divine light. She wrote it capital E-N-S. Maybe it's like the entrances or ends, a different kind of old school ends. Anyway, so hard an art is not to be acquired abruptly. On the contrary, it is more in accordance with all that we know of the conditions of growth, that its perfect development in the individual should be preceded by a partial acquirement, by bewildering moments of lucidity, by splendid glimpses, whose brevity is due to the weakness of the new and still unpracticed eye, which looks upon eternity, and yet undisciplined strength of the, quote, eye which looks upon time. Of such a nature is that play of light and dark, of exaltation and contrition, which bridges the gap between the purgative and the illuminative states. Each by turn takes the field and ousts the other, for these 2 eyes of the soul of man cannot both perform their work at once. It's kind of like they say you can't experience 2 different kinds of pain at once. And so, like, when you're giving birth, you do deep breaths, and like sometimes people are doing this, the nurses or your spouse, so that your husband, so that so that you're not concentrating on the pain of giving birth. Anyway, it's the same. You can't, like, if you're having an illuminative state, you're not going to be in the painful place. If you're in this purgation where it's cleaning you out state, then you're not in the illuminative place at the same time. Anyway, it makes sense. So that is the moment which marks the real boundary between, for these two eyes of the soul, man cannot both perform their work at once. To use another and more domestic metaphor, that divine child which was, in the hour of the mystic conversion, born in the spark of the soul, must learn like other children to walk alone. Each effort to stand brings with it first a glorious sense of growth and then a fall. Each fall is but the occasion of another struggle towards obtaining the difficult balance which comes when infancy is past. There are many eager trials, many hopes, many disappointments. At last, as it seems suddenly, the moment comes. Tottering is over. The muscles have learnt their lesson. They adjust themselves automatically. And the new self suddenly perceives itself, it knows not how, as standing upright and secure. This is the moment which marks the real boundary between the purgative and the illuminative states. The process of this passage of the new or spiritual man from his awakening to the illuminated life has been set out by Jacob Boehme in language which is at once poetic and precise. Quote, "When Christ the cornerstone, i.e. the divine principle latent in man, stirreth himself in the extinguished image of man, in his hearty conversion and repentance," he says, "then Virgin Sophia," which is wisdom, "appeareth in the stirring of the Spirit of Christ in the extinguished image, in her virgin's attire, before the soul, at which the soul is so amazed and astonished in its uncleanness, that all its sins immediately awake in it, and it trembleth before her. For then the judgment passeth upon the sins of the soul, so that it even goeth back in its unworthiness, being ashamed in the presence of its fair love, and entereth into itself, feeling and acknowledging itself utterly unworthy to receive such a jewel." This is understood by those who are of our tribe and have tasted of this heavenly gift, and by none else. But the noble Sophia draweth near in the essence of the soul, and kisseth it in friendly manner, and tinctureth its dark fire with her rays of love, and shineth through it with her bright and powerful influence, penetrated with the strong sense and feeling of which the soul skippeth in its body for great joy, and in the strength of this virgin love exalteth, and praiseth the great God for his blessed gift of grace. I will set down here a short description how it is when the bride thus embraceth the bridegroom, for the consideration of the reader who perhaps hath not yet been in this wedding chamber. It may be he will be desirous to follow us, and to enter into the inner choir, where the soul joineth hands and danceth with Sophia, or the divine wisdom. Wow. That's so cool, because the other day when I was making a video, I just started singing. In the middle of it, I started singing because I had been learning the Beatles song, "You have found her, now go and get her. Remember to let her into your heart, and then you'll start to make it better." It's Hey Jude, right? And I said in that video, I said, that's Lady Wisdom, because that's just what was coming to me. It's Lady Wisdom. Your life will start to be better when you let her into your heart. And, don't be afraid, Don't close your heart off because of bitterness or unbelief, going into your mind instead of your childlike essence nature, trusting and knowing this divine love. Anyway, that's from Jacob Boehm's book, The Way to Christ. I don't remember what that video was called. If someone comments here and says, will you find the Hey Jude video? I know I was in a giant green park. And I was wearing a blue sweatshirt. And I did make a reel out of it. I think I put that on TikTok or Instagram. So there's a 1-minute clip of that part. Anyway, good luck finding it. You feel free to link it here too if you find it. Okay, so... Okay. I just was remembering I borrowed my friend's Boehm book, Jacob Boehm, but I didn't get to read it. And she moved, so I had to give it back to her. I think that's it was, because this is from the complete English translation of Boehm's works. I know that's free online as well. And I make a video. I made a video, one of my first videos before I ever wanted to be on camera, was talking about this PDF reader called Voice Dream Reader. You don't have to buy the rest of it. And I don't get paid for it. I'm just saying it reads your PDF, so it will read straight through this. I get the voice of Brian. It's just his British voice. And so you can listen to all these free PDFs and just have Brian, if you go on a road trip, it'll just read through your playlist of books. It's great. And it plays in the background too, so your phone can still be working, whatever you need to do on your phone. Chapter 4, the illumination of the self. All right, so I'm glad it's still light out because I do this so you can take a screenshot of the beginning of the chapter, and I'll read it too. But it's sometimes fun to just look at that while you're listening. Illumination, the characteristic mystical consciousness. Many artists attain to it, part of the normal process of transcendence. Its nature, Plotinus, I think she misspelled this. It's usually Plotinus, but Plotinus, the, quote, mystic dance, distinctive character of illumination, nature mysticism, illumination and the mysteries, mystic and artist, the chalice of the spirit of life, various forms and grades of illumination. It always seems final to the mystic, must be expressed artistically. Why I make these videos, right? Often received in visionary form. 3 marks of this state. 1, the sense of divine presence. 2, the lucid vision of the world. 3, automatic activity. Twofold character of the illuminated consciousness. Sense of the presence of God. The source of mystic joy, Saint Teresa of Avila. The horizon of union, Saint Bernard. Hue of Saint Victor. Distinction between horizon of union and unitive life. The quote, sense of the presence, end quote, and active life, Brother Lawrence. I love Brother Lawrence. Passivity, Madame Guyon, Saint Catherine of Genoa, and illumination. Nature of illumination. An access of new light, Jacopine de Todi. Law, St. Augustine. The vision of reality, Dante. Angela of Foligno. Transcendent and personal illumination, Suso. The illuminated vision of the world, its nature, Jacob Boehm. Fox, Blake. The mystics and animal life, St. Francis of Assisi. St. Rose of Lima. Platonism and illumination. Plotinus, the Kabbalah, law, illumination, a halfway house. It cannot give final satisfaction to the spiritual consciousness. So illumination of the self can't give you the satisfaction you're looking for. Now, I was just listening to The Lord of the Rings before this when I went on my walk for an hour here at the ocean. And it got to this part, and it was talking about the Rangers. And I never heard this part before, even though I've read the book I don't know how many times, and I've listened to it I don't know how many times. But it said, to the bereaved folk, the Rangers had a kind of vision they didn't know how to describe, and they could hear things that other people couldn't. And they talked to the animals and the trees as if they were people, something like that. And they had knowledge of old stories that people had forgotten, and everyone wanted to hear their stories. Oftentimes they would. But he just described, Tolkien was a devout Catholic. He went to Mass every day. I read in the letters that he wrote to his son that he recommended it to him when his son had to go to war or something. Tolkien put it in, he was just, what he was describing with Strider, Aragorn, was talking about the way of the mystic. In a way, it was just, I don't know if he was doing that consciously or not. He didn't like when people were saying, this means that, and this means that, because he's just writing a story. He's just inspired. Look at the sun. Look, there's just the sun peeking right through that cloud. I hope my phone was on that. There's more people coming. All right, so anyway, it's gone now. So if you want to read that part in The Lord of the Rings, you can just look up the quote. It's something, it's right after they got to the prancing pony, I think. It's there somewhere. Anyway, it was really beautiful, because it reminded me of St. Francis, who could talk to the animals, and I've met a Native American Christian shaman that was teaching me about it, but I won't go into it more, or else, I can't say some things, they'd lock me up. But I am part Native American, so please don't. It's part of my heritage. It's part of all of our heritage, because we're souls in physical bodies. But he told me of this story where he was working with this horse. The people that owned the horse traded him. They gave him, I can't remember, like a carton of cigarettes or something, because he would smoke and the incense would be like prayer. And anyway, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with their very fancy horse. And this guy's name was Red Elk, and he just went in and asked the horse. And the horse, I don't know, it's like showed him a picture of his hoof, and like something stuck in between the shoe, the horseshoe, and lo and behold, that's what was there. Like, how did he get that information? I don't know, right? But they were very grateful. It's like The Horse Whisperer, Oh, that movie was so cool. The guy, I think Robert Redford did a movie with the guy that he was just really sensitive from abuse in childhood, and I could just cry for like an hour thinking about that beautiful movie. I learned so much from that movie. I think it's called The Horse Whisperer. You can look it up like that. Robert Redford directed it, and I think that's who did. It was very touching and very, very beautiful. It shows you a mystic way. Shows you how to stop dissipating your energies. The horses show you that. What happens when you spoil yourself? Because there was this one spoiled horse that was about to kill people and kill its owner, and she didn't want to set boundaries on it. It's our childhood programming. We learn to defend people we ought not to defend, and we put up with things we ought not to put up with until we know better. And then when you know better, and more when you get a knowing in here and love, then you do better, because you're worth that love. Anyway, little side psychology session. In illumination, we come for the first time to the consideration of that state of consciousness which is popularly supposed to be peculiar to the mystic, a form of mental life, a kind of perception which is radically different from that of normal men. That is so weird. I haven't read ahead, and that's exactly what Tolkien was just describing. Today, I happened to be on that part of the book. I was listening to it. I think that's a whale. I really wanted to listen to more last night, but I had to make myself go to sleep. If I see that it's a whale, I'll show you guys while it's still light. But I'll turn it. It's straight out in front of us in the middle. But there's just, it could be seals too. I can't zoom in when I have my camera this way. It's like, I think it's, I'm not seals. I didn't mean seals. I meant dolphins. I grew up in Texas, so like sometimes I get my sea animals mixed up. It's not mermaids. It's dolphins, I think. That would be fun to run down there with you guys, but nevertheless, some people came for the book. Sometimes there's dolphins that'll jump up right by the whales, but anyway. All right. So, in Illumination, I'll read that sentence again. It's worth reading. We come for the first time to the consideration of that state of consciousness which is popularly supposed to be peculiar to the mystic, a form of mental life, a kind of perception which is radically different from that of, quote, normal men. You know, like Bob Marley, he said all of his songs are about a mystic understanding of God, all of them, of divine love. They're all conveying a higher message. Even if you listen to that, he made a remake of the song, Sugar, sugar, da 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 da, honey, honey. Yeah, it's so cool because it's like talking about the union between God and man, the sugar and the honey, but it looks like it's talking about a relationship between man and woman, which it can be that too, but I know he's talking about the higher state as well. Your soul in divine love, because that is the bridegroom and the bride, right? Anyway, his awakening to consciousness of the absolute. His preceding adventures and experiences cannot be allowed this quality. His awakening to the consciousness of the absolute, though it be often accompanied by circumstances of splendor and intensity which seem to mark it off from other psychic upheavals of that kind, does but reproduce upon higher levels those characteristic processes of conversion and falling in love which give depth and actuality to the religious and passional life. Passional, right? The purification to which he then sets himself, though this does as a rule possess certain features which are confined to the phenomena of mystical development. It is again closely related to the mortifications of ascetic, but not necessarily mystical piety. It is the most exalted form with which we are acquainted of that process of selection and self-discipline, that pruning and training of the human plant, which is the essence of all education and a necessary stage in every kind of transcendence. You know, whether you get your education from nature, like Brother Lawrence, let's say, or from experiences, you know, he had like a limp and had to crawl certain places and wash the dishes, and I don't know about his formal education, you know, we'll see if she mentions it, but you get the education of the purification of yourself, the purgation, which we just read about in the last 3 videos, I think. Here the mystic does but adopt in a more drastic shape the principles which all who would live with an intense life, all seekers after freedom, all true lovers must accept, though he may justly claim with Ophelia that these wear their rue with a difference. Isn't Ophelia from a Shakespeare play? I think my sister played. Anyway. Sorry, I don't know that one for sure. But I don't need to know everything. I'm volunteering my time here. Yay! There's like no pressure when I do this. I love it. It's not like my other work, but I try not to put pressure on myself for that, just be present. But in the mighty swing back into sunshine, which is the reward of that painful descent into the cell of self-knowledge, he parts companies with these other pilgrims, those who still go with him a little way, certain prophets, poets, artists, dreamers, do so in virtue of that mystical genius, that instinct for transcendental reality, which seers and creators so often possess. These people have a measure, sometimes a large measure, of illumination. They are the initiates of beauty or of wisdom, as the great mystic is the initiative of love. He has now obtained a veritable foothold in that transcendental world into which they too can penetrate now and again, has acquired the art of fellowship, not yet of union, with the great life of the all, and thence draws strength and joy, really and actually, as one whose novitiate is finished. He has entered the inner choir, where the soul joineth hands and danceth with Sophia, the divine wisdom. That's just the quote again from Jacob Boehme. I'm gonna turn you guys to the ocean again. Oh, I had it already. Let's see. Okay. It's getting darker, so we'll see people less and less. Okay, I think that's it. And keeping time with the great rhythms of the spiritual universe, feels that he has found his place, or her place, you know. She usually uses his for everything, and the soul is like a woman, so she reserves that for the soul, or the bride of the bridegroom. This change of consciousness, however abrupt and amazing it may seem to the self which experiences it, seems to the psychologist a normal incident of that organic process of development which was initiated by the first awakening of... I think still she's talking about, when she says psychologist, she's talking about, you know, I mean, there weren't a lot of psychologists in 1910. So she's talking about these kind of people that are explorers, studiers of the soul, your psyche. I can't remember when Freud was. I had to know it for so many tests in my graduate school to get my doctorate, but it's just not in this mind that I'm in right now. Right now I'm in sort of a mystic mind, not a get into knowledge mind. But okay, so the change of consciousness, however abrupt and amazing it may seem to the self which experiences it, seems to the psychologist a normal incident of the organic process of development, which was initiated by the first awakening of the transcendental sense, responding to the intimations received in that awakening, ordering itself in their interest, concentrating its scattered energies on this one thing. The self emerges from long and varied acts of purification to find that it has pushed through to another order of reality. It has risen to acute consciousness of a world that was always there, and wherein its substantial being, that ground which is of God, has always stood. Such a consciousness is transcendental feeling, in excelsis, that's what it's called, in excelsis. Wow, in excelsis Deo. It's like past the normal feeling is what it feels like to me. And Deo is God. But joy in God. And anyway. Such a consciousness is, quote, transcendental feeling, in excelsis, a deep intuitional knowledge of the secret plan, the, quote, secret plan, end quote. As a chorus about its choragus, says Plotinus, in a passage which strangely anticipates Boehme's metaphor, so do we all perpetually revolve about the principle of all things. So he's basically saying this dance again around the principle of all things. But because our attention is diverted by looking at things foreign to the choir, all the foolish complexities of the world of appearance, the little diurnal incidents of that existence which we call life, We are not aware of this. Hence, instead of that free and conscious cooperation in the great life of the all, which alone can make personal life worth living, we move like slaves or marionettes, like Pinocchio, like a puppet, and oblivious of the whole to which our little steps contribute, fail to observe the measure whereto the world keeps time. The worlds keep time. Quote, whereto the worlds keep time. We fail to hear the cosmic dance. We don't hear that song or the dance. Whoops. Our minds being distracted from the Coryphaeus in the midst, the quote, energetic word, who sets the rhythm, we do not behold him. We are absorbed in the illusions of sense. The eye which looks on eternity is idle. But when we do behold him, says Plotinus, then we obtain the end of our wishes and rest. Then also we are no longer discordant, but form a truly divine dance about him, in the which dance the soul beholds the fountain of life, the fountain of intellect, the principle of being, the cause of good, the root of the soul. End quote. Such a beholding, such a lifting of consciousness from a self-centered to a God-centered world is of the essence of illumination. It will be observed that in these passages, the claim of the mystic is not yet to supreme communion, to that, quote, flight of the alone to the alone, which is the Platonian image for the utmost bliss of the emancipated soul, a vision and a knowledge, which is the result of conscious harmony with the divine world of becoming, is the ideal held out, not self-mergence in the principle of life, but willing and harmonious revolution about him that, quote, in dancing we may know what is done. Revolution around divine love. Him was a capital H. This distinction holds good in almost every first-hand description of illumination which we possess, and it is this which marks it off from mystic union in all its forms, all pleasurable and exalted states of mystic consciousness in which the sense of I-hood persists, in which there is a loving and joyous relation between the absolute as object and the self as subject, fall under the head of illumination, which is really an enormous development of the intuitional life at high levels. All veritable and first-hand apprehensions of the divine obtained by the use of symbols, as in the religious life, all phases of poetic inspiration, glimpses of truth, are activities of the illuminated mind. To, quote, see God in nature, to attain a radiant consciousness of the otherness of natural things, is the simplest and commonest form of illumination. Most people, under the spell of emotion or of beauty, have known flashes of rudimentary vision of this kind. Where such a consciousness is permanent, as it is in many poets, there results that partial yet often overpowering apprehension of the infinite life immanent in all living things, which some modern writers have dignified by the name of nature mysticism, where it is raised to its highest denomination till the veil is obliterated by the light behind, and, quote, faith has vanished into sight. Oh, William Blake. Finally, she says his first name. Anyway, she says, for instance, Keats, Shelley, Wordsworth, Tennyson, Browning, Whitman. That's from the Letters of William Blake. I don't know if we got to that footnote yet. No, it's coming up. Okay, so where it is raised to its highest denomination till the veil is obliterated by the light behind, and, quote, faith has vanished into sight, we obtain such a case as that of Blake, William Blake, right? In which the mystic swallows up the poet. Dear sir, says that great genius in one of his most characteristic letters, written immediately after an onset of the illuminated vision which he had lost for many years. Oh, wow. It's so amazing when it comes back like that. He says, "Excuse my enthusiasm, or rather madness, for I am really drunk with intellectual vision whenever I take a pencil or graver into my hand." Yeah, that's Letters of William Blake. Many a great painter, philosopher, or poet, perhaps every inspired musician, has known this indescribable inebriation of reality in those moments of transcendence in which his masterpieces were conceived. This is the quote saving madness of which Plato speaks in the Phaedrus, the ecstasy of the quote God-intoxicated man, the lover, the prophet, and the poet, quote, drunk with life, when the Christian mystic, eager for his birthright, says, "Sanguis Christi inebria me." I think that's Holy Christ. Inebriate me. Like, drunken me with... It says not to get drunk on anything but the Holy Spirit, I love that verse. It's like, yes. This is okay. He is asking for just such a gift of supernal vitality, a draught of the wine of absolute life, which runs in the arteries of the world. Those to whom that cup is given attain to an intenser degree of vitality, hence to a more acute degree of perception, a more vivid consciousness than that which is enjoyed by other men. It is the prize of which purgation is the price, the passing from death unto life. I know a bishop that always says, no one, everyone wants to push away the cross. Like, the cross is foolishness to those people of this world, and even to us when you're a mystic, or whatever. All of us are souls. We don't understand the cross, and our flesh pushes it away, but it's like the prize of the purgation is what she just said. It is the prize of which purgation is the price, the passing from death unto life, to get this intenser degree of vitality and sight, vivid consciousness. Blake conceived that it was his vocation to bring this mystical illumination, this vision of reality, within the purview of ordinary men, to, quote, cleanse the doors of perception, end quote, of the race. They thought him a madman for his pains. I was just quoting that in a book today. I was writing an ebook, but I remembered a Lewis Carroll quote when he said, like, you and I will be the best of friends, and we're a bit mad or bonkers or something like that. He's like, the best of us are, It's like that. It's like that. Here's Blake, quote, "I rest not from my great task to open the eternal worlds, to open the immortal eyes of man inwards into the worlds of thought, into eternity, ever expanding in the bosom of God, the human imagination. O Savior, pour upon me thy spirit of meekness and love. Annihilate the selfhood in me. Be thou all my life." Wow. That's from Jerusalem. I think that's William Blake still. The mystics of the antique world were, one and all, attempts, often by the wrong road, of a merely magical initiation, to, quote, open the immortal eyes of man inwards, exalt his powers of perception until they could receive the messages of a higher degree of reality. In spite of much eager theorizing, it is impossible for us to tell how far they succeeded in this task. In the case of those who had a natural genius for the infinite, symbols and rituals which were doubtless charged with ecstatic suggestions, and which often dramatize the actual course of the mystic way, may well have brought about some change of consciousness, though hardly that complete rearrangement of character which is an essential part of the mystic's entrance of the true illuminated state. Hence Plato only claims that, quote, he whose initiation is recent can see immortal beauty under mortal veils. Wow. Quote, O blessed he, in all wise, who hath drunk the living fountain, whose life no folly staineth, and whose soul is near to God, whose sins are lifted pall-wise, as he worships on the mountain. I think, that's the Bacchae, Bacchae of Euripides, translated by Gilbert Murray. Sometimes I'll say the footnotes, the ebook is in the description here, so you can find it, and all the footnotes are there. Thus sang the initiates of, we're on page 284, I don't know if it has the same page numbers. Thus sang the initiates of Dionysius, that mystery cult in which the Greeks seem to have expressed all that they knew of the possible movement of consciousness through the rites of purification to the ecstasies of the illuminated life. The mere crude rapture of illumination has seldom been more vividly expressed. With its half-oriental fervors, its self-regarding glory and personal purification achieved, and the spiritual superiority confirmed by adeptship, may be compared the deeper and lovelier experience of the Catholic poet and saint who represents the spirit of Western mysticism at its best. His sins, too, had been, quote, lifted pall-wise as a cloud melts in the sunshine of divine love. But here the center of interest is not the little self which has been exalted, but the greater self which deigns thus to exalt. The S with a capital L, divine love, Oh, here's a quote. Oh, burn that burns to heal. Oh, more than pleasant wound. Oh, and oh, soft hand, oh, touch most delicate, that dost new life reveal, that dost in grace abound, and slain dost from death to life translate. Remember one of the other times she read, one person can die, one time in a day, and another can have 1,000 deaths and 1,000 resurrections that day. It keeps playing in my head. Here the joy is as passionate, the consciousness of an exalted life as intense, but it is dominated by the distinctive Christian concepts of humility, surrender, and intimate love, not of yourself exalted, of the self. Anyway, we have seen that all real artists, as well as all pure mystics, are sharers to some degree of the illuminated life, are sojourners in, if not true citizens of, the land of heart's desire. They have drunk with Blake from the cup of intellectual vision, which is the chalice of the spirit of life, know something of its divine inebriation, whenever beauty inspires them to create. Some have only sipped it. Some, like John of Parma, have drunk deep, accepting in that act the mystic heritage which with all its obligations. But to all who have seen beauty face to face, the grail has been administered, and through that sacramental communion they are made participants in the mystery of the world. In one of the most beautiful passages of the Fioretti, it is told how Brother Jacques of La Massa, unto whom God opened the door of his secrets, saw in a vision this chalice of the spirit of life, delivered by Christ into the hands of St. Francis, that he might give his brothers to drink thereof. That's so awesome. Then came St. Francis to give the chalice of life to his brothers, and he gave it first to his brother John of Parma, who, taking it, drank it all in haste, devoutly, and straightway he became all shining like the sun. And after him St. Francis gave it to all the other brothers in order. And there were but few among them that took it with due reverence and devotion, and drank it all. Those that took it devoutly and drank it all became straightway shining like the sun, but those that spilled it all and took it not devoutly became black and dark and misshapen and horrible to see. But those that drank part and spilled part became partly shining and partly dark, and more so or less according to the measure of their drinking or spilling thereof. But the aforesaid brother John was resplendent above all the rest, the which had more completely drunk the chalice of life, whereby he had the more deeply gazed into the abyss of the infinite light divine. End quote. No image, perhaps, could suggest so accurately as this divine picture the conditions of perfect illumination, the drinking deeply, devoutly, and in haste, that is, without prudent and self-regarding hesitation, of the heavenly wine of life, that wine of which Roll says that it, quote, fulfills the soul with a great gladness through a sweet contemplation. John of Parma, the hero of the spiritual Franciscans, in whose interest this exquisite allegory was composed, stands for all the mystics who, quote, having completely drunk, have attained the power of gazing into the abyss of the infinite light divine. In the brothers who drank part and spilled part, so that they become partly shining and partly dark, according to the measure of their drinking or spilling thereof, we may see an apt image of the artist, musician, prophet, poet, dreamer, more or less illuminated, according to the measure of self-abandonment in which he has drunk the cup of ecstasy, but always in comparison with the radiance of the pure contemplative, partly shining and partly dark. Hinder me not, says the soul to the senses in Mathilde of Magdeburg's vision. I would drink for a space of the unmingled wine. End quote. In the artist, the senses have somewhat hindered the perfect inebriation of the soul. We get caught up in our senses. All right, I'm going to stop there. We're in the illumination of the self. Oh, lovely. I love this chapter. It goes on for a long time. Maybe like 30 more pages. All right. I wish you so much love. Thanks for being here. I'd appreciate it if you like this so that other people who are looking with their senses will go, oh, I wonder what this is. Because then, YouTube pushes it out with the algorithms when we put comments. You can put your favorite quote or your favorite line of Plato or whatever you'd like. Because the more they see, I think 6 words or more or something, I don't know, in the comments, they push this out. They think lots of people are watching it, and the more you watch the videos all the way through, even if it's just one of my 1-minute videos, if you watch that, I don't know how to, they keep changing all their algorithms too, so you don't have to worry about all of that, but I'd appreciate it if you put in the energy to do that so that this video can get out to more people, because I don't pay for ads and I'm not monetized as of right now when I'm recording this. All right, I wish you so much love. I appreciate it. Share with like-minded, right? Like-souled.